WV Uncommon Place. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts, along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episode. The Uncommon Place digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to our Uncommon Place.
Greetings, everybody. The intro tells you who I am. Let me just cut straight to the chase. As a young man growing up, I'm 40 years old. Let's go back to 1994. 1994, Nintendo was going to make a CD edition to the Super Nintendo. They partnered with two different companies at that time, Philips, and then they partnered with Sony. Philips ended up developing their own device called the CDI, and Sony would take the innards of what was the Super Nintendo CD-ROM and turn it into the Sony PlayStation. So what we're about to talk about today, I have to directly blame Nintendo, because Nintendo could have saved me. Nintendo could have had the world right, and I would know no different of Sony. And to handle this problem that I have with Sony today, I have with me an amazing intellectual property attorney at law. I know y'all like the way I did that. His name is Kirk Sigmon. And don't get his last name mixed up, the Sigmon part from a Capcom game. I know we could go there, but let's not do that. So, Kirk, what I really would like you to do real quick is introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself. But one thing I need you to do that's nostalgic to the show, I need to know something that you were taught that didn't come from a parent.
Sure.
And that's just a little icebreaker.
Sure. So yeah, I'm an intellectual property attorney. I've been working for about over a decade and stuff. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, it's patents, trademarks, copyrights. One of my specialties is video games. So I've been doing that for quite some time. I've worked for Japanese companies, American companies. A lot of games you've probably played are folks who've made, made by clients of mine. But something I've learned from folks who aren't my parents, honestly, just kind of, I'll call it playground politics, especially as a kid. Knowing how to deal with other kids was a big part of my growing up process and something that helped me immensely even today in knowing how to handle people. And that's a big part of being a lawyer.
Okay, I like that. Now, your career started in Tokyo, and you obviously have said that you worked across the United States, Japan, Korea, China, and Europe in intellectual property law. How do the international experiences shape the way you approach technology law and business relationships?
Sure. Honestly, the world's gotten kind of smaller in the sense that technology is everywhere. I mean, you can go to Europe, China, Asia, wherever you end up going, and you will find, more or less the standard stuff: smartphones, video games, PCs, things like that. So technology has become more international than ever. So in some ways, it's very similar. But in the same way, it's also teaching about how people engage with technology differently, right? So we in America here, we like our tech, we like our stuff, we like our cars with big touch screens in them, for example. And generally, that's kind of the same in other countries, but they have different relationships. Some of them are using technology to bail themselves out of very tough poverty. However, in Europe, in some cases, they are dealing with the fact that, they've got old castles and, thousand-year-old buildings, but they're also trying to put touchscreens in them. So it's a fun gig to get involved with people's different perspectives with how they handle that sort of thing. But yeah, I've been all over. I've been helping companies all over the nation, all over the world, and it's been very rewarding in that way. But everyone treats it a little bit differently. Of course, I like it best here, but it's kind of fun to see how other people take technology and use it for their benefit.
Okay. Now, your work spans everything from AI, self-driving cars, video games, and children's toys. Was there a specific case or a moment early in your career that made you realize emerging technology law would become your focus?
So honestly, I've always been kind of nerdy, so I knew I wanted to do it in the first place. But one of the biggest ones, honestly, is when I was a young attorney and not very important, I would end up working on the Apple Samsung case, so the fight over the shape of phones and things like that. And everyone was making fun of it back in the day because it was rounded rectangles and everything else. But it was very important to a lot of people because if you think about it, that and its progeny, that case and its progeny, resulted in everything from almost a moment where we weren't able to buy iPhones, right? There was an ITC exclusion order at one point saying, "Nah, you can't import certain things, Apple. We're going to prevent you." I think President Obama stepped in at that point. But it's kind of a cool one, right? You realize that people are engaging with this stuff every day, and it really matters when, say, some court says something about technology and it affects you. That's a big deal. That could affect your day-to-day life in a way you wouldn't expect. So it was something that kind of got me even more addicted than I already was.
Okay, whoa, man, you're one of the ones that helped me keep the iPhone, and I will do, intact. And for Google people, I do keep a Google on the side just for tech. Being me and you are in the same realm. I like technology, and with me personally, I like to see innovation, and I like to see where certain companies create their own ecosystem.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and when you get involved in stuff like that, that's how we end up where we are today. Companies create their own ecosystems, and them and their rival trade back and forth. So we won't go that deep, but we know. Now you're part of a graduate research cohort at Dartmouth studying artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine vision, and FPGAs. How does staying deeply involved in technical research give you an edge as an attorney in this fast moving industry? Because what was technically correct yesterday is not technically correct today.
Right. So that's actually the reason why is that all of us who work in IP, you kind of have to be a professional nerd. A lot of the folks who end up doing it used to be either, PhD researchers, things like that. A lot of folks I work with are far smarter than me on that front. So you got to be a lifetime learner. It's kind of the gig that you get if you're an attorney, so you can make those arguments, but also you genuinely enjoy learning about new technology. And so, yeah, the research at Dartmouth in many ways it can be very boring in some ways. It's a lot of math, honestly, but it's important to be the kind of person who likes to learn. So if you're the person who wants to constantly be tinkering with things, it's one of those areas where you can focus on, say, compared to tax law or what you think of a normal attorney doing, just yelling in court. And we do that plenty of that as well when it comes to it. But the general rule of thumb is we are always having to update ourselves as to what the new technologies are, what the state of the art in terms of science is. It's very, very important. So it's a pretty critical area that I immensely enjoy, but you got to be nerdy about it.
Okay, now you balance doing the IP law with doing other work. You've helped with detainees at Guantanamo Bay and other people that have been victims of other crimes. How does this contrast your personal definition of justice and purpose in your legal career? And the reason I ask this question is because this shows the other human side, because we did all the autonomous stuff. And this is, we're like, hey, he does more law than just IP.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're a lawyer, you have the ability to help people in more direct ways. And the reality of it is with technology, if we're talking cell phones, video game consoles, you name it, we're talking big companies, right? But when it comes down to it, you still have the ability to go help people on individual levels. So people who have been victims of a crime or just folks who just need help with housing and that sort of thing. So doing pro bono like that's something I've done for a very long time. Everything from helping, little old ladies with wills to all the way down to just sort of helping people deal with Social Security and things like that. But at the end of the day, as a lawyer, I think you're sort of obligated to do it. Most bar associations expect you to. I find it very rewarding, and it's different enough than say, helping a multi-billion-dollar company figure out some patent issue, which is it's important, but doesn't really have that sort of immediate payoff.
Okay. Now, one thing I'd like you to do is something that's another thing that's nostalgic to the show. We do this thing called a shameless plug, and the shameless plug is where people can learn where they can meet and greet you across the internet. Heck, they might even be able to buy you a cup of coffee or whatever you decide they can do in life and whatever interaction you would like. So, Kirk, could you please tell the internet, tell the world, tell the audio, tell the video people, however someone decides to listen to this, and also for the people that just read a transcript, that's something really odd I didn't know. There's a group, there's a collective of people that don't listen or watch podcasts; they read them.
Man.
Right. So the floor is yours.
Sure. So, long story short, if you are interested in speaking with me about IP matters, that I know that's a sort of a orthogonal thing that many people might not have an issue with, I can certainly provide my information. I've recently founded a law firm called Kelvan, where we specialize in any form of tech law, especially IP. And then, notwithstanding that, if you're just interested in learning about video game law, I and my co-founders run a website called Patent Arcade. That's again Patent Arcade. It's a website where we talk about video game IP and law. So we cover everything from, say, the patent governing the GameCube game Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, and how it makes you crazy in the game, to new fights over what is and is not legal in the IP world when it comes to video games. So it could be fun examples of old school patents on the old Nintendo consoles, or anything to who's suing who and why they're doing it. And we've done that for quite some time now. I think it's well over a decade old at this point. But we've revitalized it. We have a database of well over 5,000 different examples of patents in the video game space. So one fun thing you can do is go in there and find stuff from your childhood, because it's definitely in there. And it's a fun thing to read. So I'll certainly share it in the show notes as well. But that's kind of where I have a lot of passion, is talk about the video game side of this and sort of educating people as to the weird legal issues that originate from video games as compared to movies, music, you name it.
Okay. Now, our situation with Sony goes back to it's a DRM issue, but I'm gonna let you go into all detail about that. But here's one thing I want to do for the caveman of video gamers, the guy that just buys games or buys a digital only console, which I am a victim of that with Sony with Microsoft. I decided, I took the Series X, I bought both of them at one point, but I realized with what we're going to talk about, my issue about this would be if this had been Microsoft. I've been down with Microsoft since 2001.
Right.
I am a legacy. Every Xbox I have bought digital property on, and I still own all the way from the original Halo, because you remember that was a digital, one of the first digital releases you could buy console wise, beyond if you had a Sega Dreamcast, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the caveman is going to say this sentiment: I paid for the game, I should own it forever. And in this conversation, we're going to cover why this statement has different connotations to it now. So, Kirk, what I'm going to do, and this is the most balanced I've ever done in a podcast, I've actually got to hand this matter over to you first. You have to give us the report on Sony real quick,
Sure.
because from the time that you and I talked, the report was an allegation. We both can say that, correct? And
Yep.
then it has come out now that the allegations have been substantiated.
That's right.
So the floor is yours, sir. Please tell us what went on with Sony in the last 72 hours and why we are where we are today.
Sure. So the high level version is that, DRM stands for digital rights management. It means that it's the way in which game companies protect their IP, their copyrighted work, their games, from being stolen in some sense. That's how they characterize it for sure. Now, what has happened with Sony is that it started as a rumor, and as you indicated, it's become more and more real. It seems as if Sony's enacting a 30-day window whereby, to maintain access to a video game, you have to check in online within a 30-day window. So the example would be, let's say you buy a new video game, you install it on your PlayStation, you would have to connect that PlayStation to the internet and regularly check it in at least once every 30 days in order to maintain control of that game. Now, it's not saying you lose access to the game. What it really is getting at is, if you were to, say, disconnect your console from the internet completely and then not access it, or and try to play the game, say, in day 35, 36, presumably the goal here is to prevent you from accessing that game. Now, the reason why that's kind of come to fore is that Sony has seen some evidence, at least if you believe them, of folks sort of trying to abuse the way in which that system works. So the quintessential example would be, let's say I go buy the new, some new video game, and my buddy wants to play it too, but he doesn't have the cash for it, right? One way I might do that is use Sony's game sharing platform, which I do have something like that around, to share it with him, say let him install it on his device, and then he would disconnect his device from the internet completely so he can play it for online or offline purposes. And then I can still enjoy my sort of virtual copy of the game online. So that way no one knows he's technically using it. He's not phoning home on it. And thus we've sort of informally created a copy of the game without paying for it. That's what they seem to be concerned about. Now, we can get into it, but technically speaking, I'm not necessarily sure if A, that's very common, and then B, you can outright prevent that. But another undercurrent here is that there's a little bit of egg on Sony's face from the PlayStation 4 era. If some of you remember, there was a demo back early in the PlayStation 4's life cycle by Hideo Kojima, the guy that made Metal Gear Solid, and he made a game called PT. It was a downloadable horror game, and the idea was that he was perhaps depending on how you read it, trying to look into creating a new version of a Silent Hill game. And it was a fantastic little demo. Like people absolutely loved it, but it got pulled off the store. But what ended up happening was, if you looked on eBay, there were a lot of folks who were selling consoles with PT on it that were disconnected from the internet, so that way you could go and buy that console and play the game, even though it was no longer available on the internet writ large. And those consoles became pretty valuable. So that mentality, I think, in some ways has reminded them, or at least back in the day reminded them, that they want greater control over what you have on your console. If they want to pull something off, kind of like, Apple or Samsung can do if they really want to, or I should say Google can, they want that ability because they want to make sure that they control the game that you have. And that might be for security, that might be preventing you from stealing it. But many people who are in the sort of game preservation community, the people who want to keep these games around, are very concerned that long term this is going to mean that, say, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, we're going to lose games like PT. We're going to lose access to games that a game company doesn't want to market anymore. They wanted to pull off their storefront and that they required check-in on. So that's where that tension's rising.
Okay, and I get that because issue with me that's always been with the games. I understand licensing and everything, but I've always hated the idea of games getting delisted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because something silly and what another thing that sparked another controversy along with this, there was a Disney game called Cars 3 Driven, which it's a value game. That game got delisted at the same time. And I didn't know this until I did further research. It was one of the games that showed this whole issue.
Yep. Yep.
And that was in thinking about that, I'm like, how many times did I pass that little bargain game up? And now people are, that's a good example. Now people are really selling that game. That game's value has skyrocketed. Because just last week, like I was telling somebody, I had screenshotted it because I screenshot all the cheap games at Walmart. It was a $10 clearance game last week.
Right.
Now, intellectual property and consumer rights standpoint, do players actually own digital games, or are they really licensing a temporary access? That is the main question that I have, if you don't mind me asking that, because I know that's that's a gray area, right?
Well, unfortunately, the way it's structured now is it definitely is a license, right? A lot of game companies, especially the ones that are providing you access to an online functionality. So the easy example would be your World of Warcrafts of the world or your Call of Duty Online of the world. Their perspective is you are licensing access to the game on their conditions with fairly onerous terms of service, meaning that you don't actually own much of anything except a right to access the game at their discretion. And needless to say, not everyone loves that. In fact, many, many gamers hate that because from their perspective, I think understandably so, they're spending a lot of money for access to something that the game developer can capriciously pull back, especially in the context of like online games where you are sort of assuming that they're going to provide those services, say at the servers, the matchmaking, everything else, for some duration of time, right? I'm not going to delude myself into believing that, say, Battlefield 1942 from back in like the 2000s is required to run in perpetuity. I'm not believing that. But in some sense, it's like, if I buy a game off the shelf right now, I understandably expect that I should be able to turn that thing on and play it, for a decent amount of time without necessarily seeing the game company go, it wasn't profitable, we're going to pull it off the market. Or in the Cars 2 case, they just go, we don't want to pay, say, the marketplace hosting fees. We don't want to deal with it anymore. Maybe in some cases, these companies run out of the right to sell the game because the music licenses have expired, as silly as that is. Stuff like that happens. And I as a gamer, don't want to care about that. I want to own the game like when back in the day in the 90s, if I went to a store like Walmart and I bought a cartridge for my Super Nintendo, I want to be able to plug it in just like I used to be and be done with it. Now, the realities of game development are different now. There's a reason why a lot of stuff shifted digitally, because in some cases, these games are shipping incomplete, right? The speed has to be pretty quick. Game development is much harder than it used to be. And in some cases, day one patches have become a reality of the video games industry. So you have to do that. But notwithstanding that, we as gamers expect that we should be able to buy something, hold it in our hand and say, if I put this into my PlayStation, if I, proverbially or not, I should be able to have access to it. And that's really where the tension is. And unfortunately, the reality is that's not what the license generally says.
Okay. And I also tying in another company, Nintendo. I guess it's another bit of the controversy with the Nintendo Switch 2 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am a late adapter to it. And even with the game card situation, I'm a bit like, whoa. So I understand people getting mad at Sony, but I'm really mad at Nintendo because Nintendo has made it to where everything truly is digital to a degree, except for the old stuff that's in. Now, with Sony introducing these stronger DRM restrictions, um, in our terms and agreements, someone could easily have missed this. That's one
Yep.
thing that me and you could both say right now.
Oh yeah.
And oh, what other people are going to look at is, oh, Sony didn't tell me this. Lawsuit, automatically. Let's start a class action. Let's get something going. Somebody's going to try to build a case, and you and I both know, in your professional realm, it will be a very hard situation because me and you both know Sony has this covered somewhere. Sony doesn't just have an issue. It's in the terms and conditions somewhere. We just didn't read the explicit consent we gave, more than
Right.
likely. So with the Stop Killing Games movement that has been growing, do you think legislation will eventually force publishers to preserve access to digital games? Because I'll tell you what killed me. As a younger man, I was an Xbox 360 guy. There were a lot of games, and I know that I'm not supposed to name drop a lot of stuff, but I do want to name drop these two Konami games that I'm getting back now in life: Simpsons Arcade and X-Men Arcade. Which X-Men Arcade we have in a collection now. Thank you, Limited Run. But I have had to keep an Xbox 360 to play those games, to still play, original Xbox games that don't have a license. They were backwards compatible, but I can't play on Xbox One unless I do some tampering. So I understand people, getting mad over certain digital things. One thing I will say on the behalf of Microsoft, and I want to ask you about this. Microsoft has done an amazing job of carrying the license to the consoles that it can stay with. I still have access to everything on an Xbox 360 across a server, and I can still download it as of last summer. Last summer they killed a lot of things, because it had lived its time. But seeing the type of access I had there, knowing when certain things get delisted, like when Sega delisted every one of its classic games, I
Yeah.
bought them all. I knew that that's part of the way that I have to live now. But like you said earlier, in 1996, let's go back to 94. 94, I bought a Sega Saturn. When I bought Street Fighter Alpha, Daytona USA, Virtual Fighter, all those games, they were complete. I could never worry about a game being balanced. Balance was not even in our vocabulary. We were just happy to get the game up there because we were paying this $59 and $79 price for games back then. I know, was it Chrono Trigger? That was the most expensive game I bought back then for Super Nintendo. Squaresoft took a little money from me. But those games were complete. So I can see where the older people's sentiment um comes in. But going back to Sony,
Sure.
Sony has had a long history with controversial DMR decisions. You and I can go back to Sony BMG rootkit scandal in
Oh yeah.
2005. Do you think companies still underestimate how much consumer care about trust and control over purchased media?
It's interesting because it's sort of a tension. On one hand, they're right to assume that, those of us who are getting older and who grew up with video games, we aren't the defining market as much as we used to be, by which I mean there are other people out there. There's a whole generation of kids who grew up with tablets and iPhones who are used to digital only worlds where things are more ephemeral. They probably have never held a video game physically in their hand, so they don't necessarily associate games with ownership in that way. And so on one hand, you think, okay, these companies are just waiting it out until they have enough of a demographic who just doesn't care. And they also have some pretty good arguments. I mean, one of the arguments for the game cards for the Nintendo Switch 2 is that, memory's getting expensive thanks to AI. So why would they sell you an entire thing when they can sell you a cheaper version? They save more money, they can put more towards development, yada, yada, yada. But the reality of it is, this is getting an issue. And in many ways, one undercurrent of this, and you're right, the licenses are a bit of a problem, but this term or the term that a lot of people in the contracts world use for this sort of licensing is called shrink wrap licensing, or in the tech world, click wrap licensing. The idea is that you and I don't actually know what we're agreeing to until, say, we buy the product or we, sort of deeply get into the purchasing process for a video game, and we don't have another choice, right? We can't negotiate those terms. In order to play the game, we're just presented with a pop-up of terms of service and licenses that in many ways are probably pretty fair. but none of us are reading them, right? No, very few people are actually going through the multi-page long terms and conditions for some video game we just bought. We're excited to go play it. We want to go play it. So we're not reading that. And the reality of it is, we as gamers have an understandable expectation that there's an exchange being made above and beyond a capriciously granted license that can exist in ephemera for 2 seconds and then it just disappears whenever the game company feels like it. Now, what's interesting is the game companies seem to know that if they piss off enough gamers, that something bad's going to happen. And the reason why I say that is because if you've looked at some of the recent games that have come out, and I won't name names just to be nice, but that have been colossal failures, the online ones, what you see pretty consistently is when those games are shut down early, let's say within a month or two of their release, the game company actually says, "Oh, we'll pay everyone back for the game, or we'll do something else, right? We'll give them something." And in some ways, you can interpret that as them realizing, look, at some point, if this other shoe drops, we're going to be on the receiving end of a lawsuit that would help define in a court what the expectation is for the purchase of these games above and beyond what we say in that click wrap, shrink wrap license, right? Above and beyond that, there's a risk that someone gets a class action lawsuit and says, look, I purchased a $60 video game for online services. You shut it down within a month. That's unfair to me. Ergo, you owe me money. And then some judge out there rules in some way that really changes the games industry as a whole. That's unlikely to happen, but it could happen. So you'll see these companies go, well, shoot, we're gonna try to facilitate customer happiness. We're going to try to fall on our sword a little bit here. We'll buy back the video games. We'll refund people. We will give them access to something else. We'll give them rewards. In some cases, you see them unlock everything, at the last week of it, so they can play with all the cool, purchasable DLC. You name it. But there's this perception that these game companies know, hey, we've got all these protections. We have all these arguments to be made about why we're doing this. However, the reality of it is, at some point, someone might get, torqued off enough, and we're going to see this go to court, and then some interesting decisions might be made.
Okay. Because I'll notice in one genre in particular, and I'm not going to name a game for legal reasons, but I can do this for you. Online licensed horror games.
Yeah.
There have been three in particular, based off of famous franchises that are movies. One was so messed up with its licensing. In 13 days, that game, and that's me being proverbial about that. 13 days of playing this game, which in a lifetime, it was really only 2.5 years. You all you can do is play these type of games with bots. They don't even have server existence or anything. So everything you said there, it just made me think of those three games in particular and those three movies. I was like, whoa, somebody made a lot of money real quick and real fast, knowing that they would have issues with the license and this and that later, especially the 13-day game that I was talking about.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Or
yeah.
the name. Yeah, that one right there with the licensing agreement on it tied up so crazy. I would never produce a game in the beginning, but nor here nor there. So on Sony's end, do you think they have a legal responsibility to clarify this issue publicly? Or do they not care and they know that consumers are going to keep paying prices? Because I want to be honest with you, and I'm just throwing this up. I'm throwing it up backwards. I don't want no one to know what it is. I've seen what Sony's doing, and even with this device right here, this is going to become a legal problem one day.
Oh, yeah.
And me and you are seeing in this generation, one other thing I want to do a side note on. Me and you are seeing in this generation, the first thing I've ever seen in my life, the price of consoles going up.
Yep.
In the life cycle. So the video game industry as a whole is changing. Do you see a distrust forming in the consumer base behind all this? Or do you think that this will be a backlash that Sony may not be able to come back from, sort of like the Microsoft situation that has occurred?
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned that, like, this, we've been here before with the Xbox One, right? This is an area where pretty much all game companies have tried to pull stuff like this and have irritated consumers in one way or another. Now, I don't know if they're legally obligated. I think if you're a good businessman, you've got to be getting out there and telling people what's going on here, because what happened with the Sony thing, and the reason we were joking earlier about not really knowing until the last minute if this was true or not, is that it's half of the information about this has come out through chats with Sony support, which is a very bad view, because you want people to understand what's actually out there. And look, if you're forthcoming about it, there's ways in which you can explain this in a way that makes sense. So, for example, I honestly wouldn't have an issue with this if we're talking an online game, because candidly speaking, I've got to be online to play it anyway, right? So it's like, okay, if you want me to check in on this, I've got to do that anyway to play the game. So perhaps that's just you making sure that I'm up to speed. realistically, on the back end of this, there is some concern, I think, on their part that older versions of games present unique security issues. So the quintessential example back in the day was to root a or soft mod a video game console, older versions of certain video games. So the one I'm thinking about that I used to work on, Splinter Cell on the Xbox, was something that where
Yes.
I think it was a save routine, had Linux in it, you could get in that way. So they're kind of concerned that there's security issues there. I get that, especially on the online front where you don't want people cheating. So if they go, look, we're really concerned about XYZ, this is why we're doing that. We're not trying to screw you over on some single player indie experience that you purchased. We're just trying to make sure that we're kind of secure on this because, virtually every video game company has been subject to some form of a security violation. I think that'd be more fair. Like if they're coming forward and saying, this is why we're doing this, we're not trying to screw you over. This is a security thing. This is a control thing. Sure. But when it's a indirect, secretive, learning about it through Sony chat thing, it's a bad look because it's treading right back into that territory that Microsoft entered back with the Xbox One, where it's like they're trying to force it down the throat of the gamer. That doesn't come off very well. I think most people are very reasonable about it. They understand that game development now and game maintenance now is different than it used to be. Realistically, no game company out there is going to be able to put out a cartridge with the complete game anymore to the taste of what we nowadays like. But at least be honest about it, right? At least be forthcoming. Tell people what you're doing. I think most people will be very receptive. If not, you will engender that sort of anger that a lot of people have sort of put online in the last couple of days.
Right. And I can agree with you on that because I'm actually thinking about, I was a diehard Microsoft guy because to me, it always felt like that was the spiritual Sega.
Oh
You
yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, so I stayed with it because I loved the Super Nintendo, but I wasn't really that. I mean, I was heavy into it, but everybody was. You had a Super Nintendo or Genesis. But anyway, that's another story for another day. We might have to have you on for that, or we will have you on because we could have a good talk with you. But when I thought about the situation, like you said, it really made me think about, man, do I need to keep investing money in PlayStation hardware? Do I need to take the Microsoft stance that I can play on anything, any Xbox game? I can play on anything to play Xbox now. I don't need that console anymore. And I'm like, man, Sony, you've got a lot of trust in me. I'm looking just in my work area right now. I'm looking, I see the VR. I just showed you their streaming device. Um, so you can tell that I'm deep in their ecosystem. And I was actually thinking about, not upgrading the system because I got two of them sitting in here, a slim one, which you can see right there. Like, I keep their stuff, and I'm like, you have a lot of trust. I have a lot of trust in you. You can take 3 paychecks from me in a year if you come out with something that works because you have caressed me and loved me the right way. And now you're not loving me properly by telling me that everything was a sham. You made everything pseudo now, and doing that, like, it's kind of messed me up. Now, for the near future, what would be a way you would tell a consumer to safeguard themselves if they feel like this is an issue for them? Because here's the deal, like you said earlier, I can name one company, Epic. Epic tells you ahead of time. It is very explicit that, hey, just because you're buying these accessories, this could all disappear one day. You and I
Yeah.
both know that on an Apple device, for instance, and that's one thing I will have to have you back because I would like to talk about that later. When Apple and Epic had their battle for all those years, and a certain game disappeared, all those people that were Apple customers, and this is the one odd thing, when it came back on a server 2 years ago, right? When it came back up into that marketplace, those people, everything that they had purchased was given back to them.
Right.
So I guess in that kind of concern, that it would be my concern with Sony if Sony would do something like that. Do you feel that, with the systems actually being disconnected and like the way that you explained it to me, I get that it's just like an online check. But for a game that is not very technical, because a lot of their classic games, I guess that's where the concern comes in, like you said earlier. A classic game that they would have, for instance, would be one of Sony's tier characters. Let's go with Spyro. We can say that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something we won't get in trouble for. Spyro, for instance, unless you're buying the collection and you have one of those PlayStation Classic versions, I would be pretty pissed if I have to get online, just to play that classic digital game that I
Yeah.
bought, or the instance, I'll give you a deeper one, are a Metal Gear Solid VR missions.
Oh yeah.
Because you could have bought the Solid collection, but you didn't get VR missions if I'm correct. You didn't. So that's
That's
something
right.
digital you could only get. I would be pretty pissed because how am I going to, why do I want to get online just because I want to play some VR missions of Metal Gear Solid? Um, but I do want to thank you for helping me have a better understanding of the DRM situation. And I'm glad that in the time that we talked till now, we've gotten some clarification. And like you said, Sony support kind of rough. So as a lawyer, you don't ever speculate. Speculation is not in your vocabulary. But I want to ask you as a gamer, if we can do this, as a gamer, does this change your opinion of Sony? Does it give you some of that Microsoft feeling? Or are you going to just stay like, hey, all these companies are the same and do like I'm going to do? And I'm blaming Nintendo for all of this. Nintendo started this when they just didn't do the right thing and have a Super Nintendo CD-ROM.
So my take on this is that it is dangerous, right? We're at the worst time for game companies and console manufacturers to do this because think about it this way. We've got the resurgence of PC gaming, not just from Steam being a great option, but because you've got Valve creating, the Steam console, the Steam Deck, and a resurgence of, say, Linux-based gaming where the options now to us are greater than they ever have been in terms of how to enjoy your video games. So it used to be like when I was, a young guy, like the PlayStation 2 at the time, for example, was the only way to play certain games. So of course I was going to go get that because I wanted to play it. That's just not the case anymore. So if you're a game console manufacturer now trying to play games with your customers in a way that pisses them off, including but not limited to raising the price of your games, raising the price of your console, sort of playing games with the licensing terms, you are risking losing them in a way that they might not never come back because they might be turning to some weird Linux box sold by Valve that turns out to be a great experience for them where their games are preserved and everyone's happy. So it's getting dicey in a way that it reminds me of what Microsoft did. Microsoft seemed to recover from that to some degree, but now it's kind of a dicey time. I mean, if you make people angry enough, they're going to vote with their wallet and go somewhere else, and they might never come back because you don't have much left. The console exclusive is increasingly a thing of the past. So in my view, it's a bad time to be doing this. It's a time in which the best way to do it is to be gamer's best friend. I understand that there are countervailing reasons you don't necessarily want to give people unlimited access to video games. There's plenty of very good reasons for that, I understand. But the best way to handle it is to be their best friend, to explain to them what's going on, because otherwise they're just going to go to somewhere else. And doing it via chat is not the answer, I think.
Okay, I like your answer and that it was very structured, but Kirk, we got to get the nitty gritty. You and I are gamers,
Hmm.
and we're going to talk about. We need to just take a second to go to Microsoft for a minute. Microsoft has an evolved game, first person shooter, and it's going to be coming to a PlayStation console for the first time ever. Now, I need to know, and honestly, I'm going to give you my opinion first. I am leaving Xbox behind when I get this because the response that I get on this controller for an analog, I've been gaming for a while for first person shooters, which aren't my specialty, but I do play. But I like campaigns on first person shooters. I've always loved this controller.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for this evolved game that's coming over, do you feel that your loyalty to Microsoft is leaving? Because like you said earlier, we didn't jump into the racing game or the first person shooter or no, the third person adventure game that has a lot of war going on with it. Um, those IPs are on Sony now. I know this is a totally different topic, but has that kind of made you want to like even though this DRM situation, I want to be honest, it does rub me the wrong way, but kind of knowing that my Microsoft exclusive that used to be Microsoft exclusives are now becoming part of Sony, I'm happy.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you
It's
feel? How do you feel about mainly this is what I want to know. That evolved game, that first person shooter. How do you feel about that? Because that was the only reason I stayed. Bungie, which I can say them. Bungie was the reason, not 343 Studios. I don't care about them. Bungie is the reason I stayed for that. And I know that they made another game that we won't talk about because who cares about that? I mean, you look like you're a fan of it, but that Evolve game, I'm ready for that. Even though it's nothing more but a remake of the same game I played in 2001 or whatever it was. Was it 2001? Yeah, 2001. Yeah. I'm going to be playing that, a 25-year-old game, again, with better graphics and hopefully better comm and no longer land. How do you really feel about that as a gamer? Are you excited about that? Does it make you not care about Microsoft anymore? Do you need a Microsoft console in your life right now?
I mean, they kind of told the rest of the world that you don't need one with the whole what is it? Everything's an Xbox campaign. So they've already
Yeah,
been drumming that drum for a while. It's kind of funny because I agree with you. In some ways, it's exciting because it means that I, as a gamer, get to pick where I want to play, right? So, for example, if I don't want to go buy a specific console, I prefer another one. Hypothetically, as things get more sort of diversified, as the games are appearing on more of these consoles, I can just pick the one I like the best, the controller I like the best. And we're no longer playing with old school terrible Mad Catz controllers for younger brother controllers, so we can pick whatever we want on that front too. We have all sorts of options. But the reality of it is, candidly, that that almost is scary in a way because it means that, well, at some point we're going to pick, and then some companies are going to struggle, right? That means that eventually, if enough gamers turn away from Xbox, Xbox is going to have a tough time. Now, their selection of their new head seems to suggest they're trying to pull that back a little bit. They're trying to make Xbox more like Xbox. They're going back to sort of the old logo, sort of, kind of, maybe, and they're trying to revive a lot of those good feelings about it. So I think they kind of understand that the anything is an Xbox move pushed a lot of us towards something else because perhaps we'd have preferred that. Whether or not they can unring that bell is a different question. But yeah, it's exciting because I, as a gamer, just want to play the game. I don't, in some cases, while in the past as a kid I would have cared, like, I had much more brand loyalty in a way.
right.
Nowadays, just like I want to put, push button play game. I have, controllers all over the place. I can pick one that I want to play with, and off we go. Right, done. So it's exciting because it just means I have more choices. But it could cause some trouble down the road.
I agree. And the one thing I'll say for me between both of the racing games that are console exclusive or were playing it on a PlayStation, like being able to play Sony's version, playing Microsoft together, kind of makes me feel dirty. Like I cheated on Microsoft. And then when I played that war game, after that, everything was just like, hey, Microsoft don't care no more. I don't care.
Yeah,
Nobody's
yeah.
cheating in my case. You know, I'm happy. But anyway, getting back to our main topic, I want to thank you for talking to us about the DRM issue. And my lord, Kirk, if I could say this, if you ever would do a limited series, like a podcast talking about video games, I believe the world would go crazy with your knowledge because
I
everything,
appreciate it.
because everything I talked about, you knew exactly what I was talking about just right then and there, and
Yeah.
the verbiage that I put it in because you got those exclusive games and we're just like boom.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And like you and a colleague or somebody, you already have equipment, you're already set up. So how come we don't have a podcast from you?
Well, we're actually starting a video series soon. It's gonna be short form, but it'll be kind of weird stuff on patents. And so there will be some video game talk. It'll be a lot of stuff on the IP side. That's coming soon. I mean, we're still working on that. But the idea would be not to sort of step on the folks who are already doing great analysis on that, because there's people like yourself who already provide great analysis. But what we're gonna do is dive into kind of the nitty-gritty of what's going on in the back room in terms of patents, copyrights, things like that, and explain it. So that might be coming soon. I mean, we're experimenting with it. Right now I'm doing, I experimented with the most swear-filled patents. So I found the ones that
Oh,
were swearing the most, just for dumb fun, right? And we're
yeah.
experimenting with it. But eventually we might pivot into the stuff we really know about, which is, inside baseball gaming stuff. Now the problem is I'm friends with a lot of people in the games industry. I was literally at lunch with them a few weeks ago. I think they'll stab me if I say too much, that they don't like, but that's kind of the fun, right? These guys who are in-house, they get it. They're gamers too. They're just as passionate as we are about it. So they might
Well,
just be,
can I ask you one thing if you all would do this for me? My favorite console was the GameCube.
oh yeah, yeah.
It's obviously I talk about Metal Gear Solid a lot.
Mhm.
Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, right?
Yep, yep.
You know that game was literally reworked so that it could come out.
Yes,
If
yes.
you all could cover that, because that first person shooter aspect of that game made it to even where today I still have a GameCube. I keep a copy of it. and knowing the legal ramifications that had to take place later on in life, that's what made me more intrigued talking to you, because I know the story behind the game and why it had to be reworked like it was, Sony's issue, and
Oh,
how,
and the music,
yeah,
yeah. Because the redone soundtrack is good. It's just they had to make some changes, and it was that good. It was the Russian composer, right? I don't remember his name. Yeah, there's a
yeah,
lot of issues with that. Yeah, that was a fun one. I mean, I had the game myself. I love that game, but you're right. Like it's that came in under the wire very,
right.
very narrowly.
And then the aspect of having to add the first person shooter to it,
Yep.
because that's Metal Gear Solid Sons of Liberty. That's part two. We know that from part two. That's not
Yep.
supposed to be part of part one, but it was a gaming element that only Nintendo got. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a very refreshing episode for myself. And to the audience, the one great thing about a podcast is the after effect of a podcast, which is the show notes. Kirk will be providing me with awesome information so you all can meet and greet him across the internet, and you can get entangled in his ecosystem. And for any video game developer, he's somebody you might want to talk to with everything that's going on in the world right now, if you're an indie or not, because he might be the guy that saves your company one day. And
I
I'm
hope
putting that
so.
out there because the way that things are going, like you said, and these smaller companies are always out there developing games, some quality games. You're going to have to be careful in what you're doing in the near future because of all of these laws and everything that's going on. So you'd be the guy that I would want to talk to if I was developing a video game. And I have to retain you because, you might save me from doing something wrong. So,
Hopefully not. Hopefully you're good to go, but I know what you mean.
yeah. So on that note, we're going to let the European lady take us out with that outro.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at oncommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.